In episode 93, titled Evil Twin and Rogue APs, Detection Mindset and Prevention Controls, we frame rogue wireless as impersonation that steals trust, because wireless attacks often succeed by looking normal rather than by breaking encryption directly. Wireless networks are built on a convenience trade, where devices connect quickly and users expect seamless access, and attackers exploit that expectation by presenting a network that appears familiar. The exam tends to emphasize the detection mindset because a well-run wireless environment treats unexpected radios and unexpected behavior as signals worth investigating, not as background noise. Prevention controls matter because the best wireless incident is the one that never becomes a credential loss or a network foothold, and the right controls make impersonation much harder. When you understand that wireless is an identity problem as much as a radio problem, the defensive strategy becomes clearer. Before we continue, a quick note: this audio course is a companion to the CloudNetX books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. An evil twin attack works by mimicking a trusted service set identifier, often called an SSID after first mention, so that users connect to the attacker's access point believing it is legitimate. Once a device connects, the attacker can capture credentials through fake captive portals, observe traffic metadata, or attempt to downgrade protections depending on how the client is configured. The power of the evil twin is that the user's device is doing what it was designed to do, which is connect to a known network name, and the attacker is simply abusing that trust queue. Even if the attacker cannot read properly encrypted traffic, they can still influence where traffic goes by manipulating domain name system responses, presenting deceptive login prompts, or forcing users to re-authenticate. The exam framing usually expects you to recognize that the SSID is not a strong identity proof because it is easy to copy and it carries no inherent trust. The defense, therefore, focuses on authentication strength and validation, not on treating a network name as security. A rogue access point is slightly different because it is an unauthorized device creating backdoor access to a network, often installed carelessly or maliciously inside a facility. A rogue access point can be plugged into an internal network port, bridged into a sensitive segment, and then used to provide wireless entry where none should exist. The risk is not only that attackers can connect, but that the device may bypass standard security controls, logging, and segmentation that were designed for managed wireless infrastructure. Rogue access points also increase interference and instability, which can push users toward insecure workarounds, creating a cycle where usability problems become security problems. The exam expects you to distinguish the intent and placement, where evil twin is external impersonation and rogue access point is unauthorized internal extension, but both steal trust and expand exposure. In both cases, the attacker benefits from invisibility, so detection and inventory discipline are essential. Using strong authentication is one of the most effective prevention controls because it makes looking like the right network insufficient to gain access. Enterprise authentication methods based on per-user credentials and certificates are stronger than shared passwords because they tie access to identity and can enforce policy consistently. Certificates matter because they allow clients to validate the network's identity, which prevents an attacker from simply copying the SSID and presenting a convincing prompt. When devices validate server certificates during authentication, an evil twin cannot easily impersonate the legitimate authentication infrastructure without triggering warnings or failing the handshake. Strong authentication also supports accountability because access events can be attributed to specific identities rather than to a shared secret that everyone knows. The exam generally rewards the idea that strong authentication reduces the payoff of impersonation, because even if a user connects to a fake network name, the attacker cannot easily complete a trusted authentication exchange. Wireless intrusion detection and monitoring for unknown radios are how you maintain situational awareness, because the radio frequency space is dynamic and attackers rely on you not noticing new transmitters. Wireless intrusion detection systems can observe beacon frames, authentication attempts, and unusual signal patterns, helping identify evil twins that mimic known SSIDs or devices that appear in restricted channels. Monitoring can also detect unauthorized access points by comparing observed radios to authorized inventories, and by flagging devices that advertise your network name from unexpected locations. In high-risk environments, continuous monitoring matters because rogue devices can appear briefly and disappear, and a periodic manual scan may miss them. The exam expects you to understand that wireless monitoring is not only about detecting attacks, but also about enforcing policy and maintaining a clean radio environment that supports reliable operations. When monitoring is integrated into operations, investigations become repeatable rather than improvised. User guidance is still important because wireless attacks often rely on user behavior, such as auto-joining networks or accepting unexpected login prompts. Avoiding auto-join reduces the chance a device will connect to a malicious SSID simply because it matches a remembered network name. Verifying trusted networks means users should recognize approved network names and be suspicious of duplicates, lookalikes, or unexpected captive portals, especially in public areas. Guidance should be simple and actionable, focusing on behaviors like disconnecting from unknown networks, reporting suspicious prompts, and using approved secure access methods when available. The exam framing treats user behavior as a supporting control, not as the primary control, because attackers can still trick some people, but user awareness can reduce success rates and speed detection. The best guidance is paired with technical enforcement, so users are not forced to make complex security decisions during routine connectivity. A scenario brings the risk into focus. So imagine a lobby where guests are expected to connect to a guest wireless network, and an attacker sets up an evil twin with a nearly identical network name. Guests arrive, see a familiar-looking SSID, and connect. Then they are presented with a captive portal that requests email addresses, passwords, or even corporate credentials under the guise of access registration. Because the guests are in a public space and expect a login step, the prompt feels normal, and the attacker can harvest credentials or at least collect identity information for later use. Meanwhile, some guests may access sensitive accounts over the connection, and even if traffic is encrypted, the attacker can still observe destinations and timing, which can be valuable for profiling. If the real guest network uses weak shared authentication, the attacker can also lure devices by offering a stronger signal and then simply providing access, keeping victims connected longer. This scenario illustrates why public spaces are high risk for wireless impersonation and why controls must assume attackers can be physically nearby. One pitfall is relying only on SSID hiding or media access control filtering, often shortened to MAC filtering after first mention, because these measures provide weak security and can create false confidence. SSID hiding does not prevent discovery because wireless management frames still reveal network presence to determined observers, and many client devices probe for hidden networks in ways that can leak information. Media access control addresses can be spoofed easily because they are identifiers, not secrets, and attackers can observe allowed addresses and then impersonate them. These controls also do little against evil twins because the attacker is not trying to join your legitimate network, they are trying to create a fake one that users join. The exam tends to test that you can distinguish cosmetic controls from meaningful controls, and hiding a name or filtering by spoofable identifiers is generally considered weak. Strong authentication and certificate validation are the meaningful defenses because they bind access to identity and trust rather than to easily copied signals. Another pitfall is unmanaged access points that cause interference and security gaps, because operational disorder often becomes security exposure over time. Unmanaged devices may use insecure configurations, outdated firmware, and shared passwords, and they may be installed without logging, monitoring, or proper segmentation. Interference can degrade legitimate wireless performance, pushing users to connect to whatever works, which can include malicious networks, and this creates an environment where impersonation becomes easier. Unmanaged access points also complicate incident response because responders may not know what is authorized, what is misconfigured, and what is malicious, which slows containment. The exam expects you to recognize that wireless security includes governance and inventory, not just encryption settings, because unmanaged devices represent uncontrolled entry points. When you manage wireless infrastructure consistently, you reduce both the technical and human chaos that attackers exploit. Quick wins often include using certificates, isolating guests, and scanning regularly, because these measures improve both prevention and visibility without requiring a complete redesign. Certificate-based authentication helps devices validate legitimate network infrastructure and reduces the chance that users can be fooled by a fake SSID alone. Guest isolation reduces risk by keeping guest devices from reaching internal resources and from reaching each other, limiting lateral movement and reducing the chance that a compromised guest device becomes an internal foothold. Regular scanning, both automated and manual, helps identify unknown radios and unauthorized access points, and it reinforces that the radio space is monitored rather than assumed safe. These quick wins also support policy enforcement because they make the difference between approved and unapproved wireless infrastructure visible and actionable. When implemented together, they reduce the success rate of common rogue wireless tactics. Operationally, investigating radio frequency anomalies and documenting findings turns wireless defense into a repeatable process rather than a one-off reaction. Anomalies can include new SSIDs appearing, signal strength changes in unexpected places, repeated authentication failures, or reports of users seeing duplicate network names. Investigation should correlate observations with authorized inventories, physical locations, and recent changes, because sometimes anomalies are caused by legitimate maintenance or by neighboring networks, and you want to separate noise from real threats quickly. Documentation matters because wireless incidents often recur in the same locations, and a record of what was seen, what was ruled out, and what actions were taken improves future response speed. Documentation also supports governance because it creates evidence that scanning and enforcement are active controls, not informal habits. The exam framing often values this operational discipline because detection without follow-through is incomplete defense. A memory anchor that fits this episode is verify network, authenticate strongly, monitor RF space, because it captures the core defense layers in a way that stays practical. Verify Network reminds you that SSID alone is not identity, and that devices should validate the network through trusted authentication mechanisms. Authenticate strongly reinforces the use of enterprise methods and certificates so that impersonation does not grant access even when a user connects to a malicious signal. Monitor RF space emphasizes continuous awareness of what radios exist, what they advertise, and whether unknown devices are present, because attackers rely on being unseen. This anchor keeps you from falling into the trap of relying on superficial controls like hidden names and spoofable filters. When you can explain this anchor clearly, you are demonstrating the exam-ready understanding that wireless trust must be engineered and monitored. A useful exercise is selecting controls for a high-traffic public area because these spaces amplify risk due to high device turnover and limited user attention. In such an area, strong authentication with certificate validation is critical because it reduces the ability of an evil twin to impersonate the legitimate network convincingly. Guest networks should be isolated with clear separation from internal segments, and guest access should be routed through controlled egress where monitoring and policy enforcement are feasible. Wireless intrusion detection should be active to identify unknown radios, duplicate SSIDs, and suspicious behavior patterns because physical proximity makes attack setup easy. Clear user guidance should be available and simple, emphasizing approved network names and discouraging auto-join because users will otherwise choose the strongest signal under time pressure. This exercise tests whether you can align controls to the environment's risk profile rather than applying one-size rules. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.